The morning breeze was calm and ordinary, but the scream that tore through the silence was anything but. It was the kind of sound that froze blood, the kind that made a person's instincts fire before their thoughts did. Single father Ryan Holt was locking the gate of his small house, preparing to drop his 12-year-old daughter Mara at school, when that scream echoed down the quiet neighborhood lane. It didn't belong to a child. It didn't belong to anyone he recognized. It was sharp, raw, and filled with pain, so much pain that even the crows resting on the electric wires scattered into the clear daytime sky. Ryan's heart lurched. Mara grabbed his sleeve, wide-eyed and trembling. For a brief second, everything went still, the street, the trees, even the sounds of distant traffic felt suspended in the air. Then the scream came again, weaker this time, as if something or someone was fading fast. If you believe in kindness, humanity, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindly Tube. Your support truly keeps stories like this alive. Ryan quickly crossed the street with Mara close behind, his steps fast and uneven. He followed the sound to the narrow walking trail behind their neighborhood, an overlooked path surrounded by plain stone walls and overgrown bushes. The ground was bright and dry, patches of rough cement visible through thin grass. And there, half hidden beneath a cluster of shrubs, lay a man curled on his side. His shirt was torn, his breathing shallow, and his skin pale under the clear daylight. He looked like he had been there for hours, maybe more. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and filled with fear. Ryan felt his throat tighten. Mara gasped softly, clutching his arm. The man looked like he was dying. Ryan's life had already been difficult enough. He was a single father working 2 jobs, trying to keep their small rented home, trying to raise Mara with enough love to fill the absence of her mother, who had passed away 4 years earlier. His days were long, exhausting, and stretched thin. He barely had time for himself, let alone a crisis like this. But looking at the stranger's trembling hands, Ryan couldn't walk away. Mara whispered that they couldn't leave him, and in that moment, Ryan realized his daughter had inherited the one thing he was most proud of, her mother's kindness. The man's lips moved, forming barely audible words. Ryan leaned closer, catching fragments. "Help, please, don't leave me." Ryan's instincts took over. He checked the man's pulse, weak, thready. He looked for visible injuries. Bruises covered the man's ribs and arms, and there was a deep cut along his side that had dried but was clearly infected. Ryan didn't know what had happened, but he knew one thing: if they didn't act fast, this man wouldn't survive. He tried calling emergency services, but their area often had unreliable reception. The call wouldn't go through. Panic threatened to rise in his chest, but he shoved it down. He couldn't let fear freeze him. Not today. Not in front of Mara. He slid his arms carefully under the stranger, lifting him with effort. The man was heavier than he looked, and Ryan could feel his own arms shaking. Mara ran ahead to unlock their front door. Inside their small home, sunlight entered softly through plain white curtains, illuminating the simple living room with its second-hand furniture and neatly arranged books. This was the place Ryan had tried to build as a safe haven for his daughter, despite their struggles. Now it had become a place of rescue for a man they didn't even know. They laid him gently on the couch. Mara fetched towels, water, and their small first aid kit. Ryan disinfected the wound as best he could. The man winced and groaned weakly, but he didn't fight. His eyes watched Ryan, filled with a strange mixture of fear and gratitude. Ryan noticed scars on his hands, old ones. The kind that suggested a difficult life. He wondered if the man was homeless, or maybe a victim of some attack. But this wasn't the moment for questions. It was a moment to save a life. Hours passed. Ryan canceled his morning shift, something he absolutely couldn't afford, but he did it anyway. The stranger drifted in and out of consciousness. Ryan kept checking his temperature, which was rising dangerously. Mara stayed by his side, giving him sips of water when he could swallow. She whispered soft words of comfort in her gentle voice. The man finally managed to say his name between shallow breaths. I'm Roan. Ryan introduced himself, though he wasn't sure Roan heard it. He felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a calling. He remembered how he'd struggled after losing his wife, how lonely and hopeless he'd felt, and how one stranger's kindness at the hospital cafe had given him the strength to keep going. He knew acts of compassion could change everything. By afternoon, Roan's fever worsened. Ryan knew they couldn't wait any longer for help to arrive through weak signals. He got Mara into the car and laid Roan carefully in the back seat. The local clinic was a 10-minute drive away. Ryan drove with one hand while steadying Roan with the other when the car jolted over uneven road patches. Mara whispered prayers under her breath. When they reached the clinic, Ryan practically carried Roan inside. The nurse at the reception was startled by the sight. She immediately called for the doctor. Roan was rushed into a treatment room while Ryan and Mara waited outside, their clothes stained with dirt and dried blood. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with tired but kind eyes, came out after some time. She told them Roan had severe dehydration, untreated internal bruising, and signs of violence. Without quick intervention, he wouldn't have survived much longer. Ryan felt relief wash through him, mixed with shock at how close Roan had been to death. Roan needed to be monitored for at least a few days, the doctor explained. Ryan nodded. When she asked about Roan's situation, Ryan told her the truth: they didn't know him. They found him near their home. They didn't know how he got hurt, who hurt him, or where he came from. But he had begged for help, and they couldn't turn away. The doctor gave Ryan a long, thoughtful look, recognizing the weight of what he had taken on. Over the next 2 days, Ryan and Mara visited Roan at the clinic. They brought him clean clothes, homemade soup, and small comforting items. Mara brought a drawing she made, a simple picture of their home with 3 figures standing outside: her dad, and Roan. When Roan finally regained enough strength to sit up, he held the drawing with trembling hands. Tears filled his eyes. He told them he hadn't been shown kindness in a very long time. As Roan healed, bits of his story emerged. He had been drifting for years after losing his own family in a tragic accident. Grief had consumed him. He had tried to rebuild his life, but hardship after hardship pushed him into homelessness. Recently, a group of men had attacked him and robbed him. Injured and weak, he had wandered until he collapsed near the trail behind Ryan's neighborhood. He thought he was going to die alone. Ryan listened quietly, deeply moved. He saw in Roan a reflection of his own struggle, different circumstances, but the same crushing weight of life's unpredictability. He felt something shift inside him. Compassion wasn't just an act. It was a bridge between broken people, holding them together until they could stand again. When Roan was discharged, Ryan brought him home to rest for a few days. It was supposed to be temporary, but Roan's presence slowly wove itself into their daily routine. He helped with house chores, repaired broken shelves, and assisted Ryan in small repairs around the neighborhood for extra income. He had a quiet way of appreciating everything: every meal, every safe night, every laugh Mara shared with him. Ryan noticed Mara smiling more these days. She liked having someone who listened to her school stories with patience and warmth. The neighbors soon learned that Ryan had taken in a stranger. Some whispered disapproval, calling it risky. But others admired Ryan's kindness. One elderly neighbor brought groceries, saying she wanted to support them. Another offered spare clothes for Roan. The small acts created ripples of goodwill throughout the community. Even those who were initially skeptical softened when they saw how Roan treated Ryan and Mara with respect, gratitude, and genuine affection. Weeks passed, and Roan grew stronger. He found a part-time job at a nearby workshop. He returned home every evening with tired hands but a lighter spirit. Ryan saw hope growing in him, the kind that had long been extinguished, but the day everything truly changed was the day Roan asked to speak to Ryan in private. They sat in the living room, the plain daylight filtering through the curtains, shadows lying softly across the floor. Roan expressed how deeply grateful he felt. He said Ryan and Mara had given him not just shelter, but dignity. They had saved his life in more ways than one. He wanted to repay them, not with money or favors, but with loyalty, effort, and family. Ryan wasn't expecting the emotions that welled up inside him. He realized that in helping Roan, he had filled a void he thought would remain empty forever. Not to replace his late wife, but to expand the circle of people he cared for. From that day on, Roan became part of their family, not by blood, but by choice, by shared struggle, by compassion. He became a steady presence in Mara's life, teaching her small skills, helping her with projects, walking her to school when Ryan was working. Ryan found himself less alone, sharing responsibilities, sharing worries, sharing hope. The story of a single dad and his daughter finding a dying estate.